Clean faster. Derek Stone's boot slammed into David Miller's back, sending the 42-year-old Christian janitor sprawling across the wet gym floor. The mop flew from his hands as 20 wealthy students at Summit Forge Academy watched in stunned silence. Maybe if you spent less time whispering prayers under your breath and more time doing your job, these mats would actually be clean, Derek sneered, stepping over David like he was debris. David slowly pushed himself up, water soaking through his uniform. A small silver cross swung from his neck as he steadied himself. His weathered hands trembled, not from fear, but from something else entirely. Something Derek Stone had no idea he was awakening. The students shifted uncomfortably. Laura Chen, the gym manager, looked away. But David's eyes, his eyes held 20 years of suppressed knowledge that could end Derek's career in under 10 seconds. Derek kicked the mop bucket, sending dirty water cascading across David's legs. There, now you've got something real to clean up. Maybe your God will help with that too. Have you ever been so underestimated that people forgot you might actually be dangerous? David Miller had been invisible for 3 years. Every night at 6 p.m. sharp, he'd slip through the back entrance of Summit Forge Academy with his janitor cart, blending into the background like the chrome machines and framed fight posters on the walls. The gym sprawled across 8,000 square feet of prime Redwood City real estate. Its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the upscale financial district. From the professional-grade octagon ring to the neat rows of leather punching bags, everything screamed exclusivity. Derek Stone owned 30% of this empire. At 35, he'd built his reputation training Silicon Valley executives, pro athletes, and influencers. His social feeds showcased highlight reels of devastating knockouts and hollow motivational quotes about dominance. The man who'd never made it professionally had crowned himself king of the amateurs. But Derek's kingdom had a problem he didn't know about. David moved through his cleaning routine with methodical precision, emptying bins and wiping down mirrors while the lobby screens replayed footage from the day's sparring. His dark eyes absorbed every jab, every mistake, every reckless instruction Derek's clients accepted as gospel. What Derek didn't know was that David Miller had golden gloves collecting dust in a storage unit across town. 2 decades of boxing, military combatives training, and competitive martial arts compressed into a man now pushing a mop for $12 an hour to keep food on the table for his 16-year-old daughter, Hannah. David's narrow apartment was a 15-minute drive from the gym, where Hannah waited each night with her textbooks spread across the kitchen table. She had stopped asking why her father took such a thankless night shift. The mountain of bills left after her mother's cancer treatments had taught her not to question survival. Coach Ramirez, the gym's older trainer, had noticed things. The way David instinctively straightened his posture during grappling demos, how his hands unconsciously formed perfect guard while polishing mirrors. Ramirez had coached for 25 years. He recognized muscle memory when he saw it. Meanwhile, Laura Chen kept Derek's harassment complaints locked in her office drawer. 3 other staff had already quit in 2 years, citing hostile environment. But David couldn't afford to quit. Hannah needed this job more than he needed dignity. So he absorbed Derek's daily mockery like body shots, staying upright through sheer willpower and prayer. Derek's prize student was Ryan Carter, a 21-year-old college wrestler whose wealthy father paid for extra sessions. Ryan had raw talent but dreadful defense, a flaw Derek ignored because he didn't know better. Every night, David watched him teach careless combinations and sloppy stances that would get his students hurt in any real fight. In the quiet hours after midnight, when the gym belonged only to him, David sometimes forgot himself. He'd shadowbox in the mirrors, combinations flowing like scripture recited from memory. Those were the moments he remembered what he really was: dangerous. And Derek Stone had no idea. Ryan stumbled into Summit Forge Academy at 6:45 p.m. with a black eye and a bruised ego. He had just lost his amateur bout in humiliating fashion, submitted in the first round by a smaller fighter using a basic rear-naked choke that Derek had insisted would never work. "It's not your fault," Derek barked, pacing like a caged animal. "These underground fighters, they don't fight clean." They don't follow the art like we do. David continued mopping near the equipment rack, but his grip tightened. He'd watched Derek teach Ryan that same flawed defense for months. Chin up, arms wide, neck offered like an altar. These street brawlers, Derek went on, voice rising, they don't respect martial arts. They fight like savages. They swing wild and pray for miracles. It's not real combat? Ryan nodded miserably. David's jaw clenched. He moved closer, pretending to clean around the heavy bags. That's why technique always beats brute force, Derek announced, demonstrating the same flawed defense. See, chin high, arms open. That's the proper way. No, David whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. Derek froze mid-demonstration. What did you say? The gym fell silent except for the humming AC. David realized every eye was on him. Ryan, the evening students, Laura Chen at the front desk. He had crossed a line. Nothing, sir. Sorry. He bent to pick up his mop, but Derek wasn't letting it go. No, please. The Christian janitor wants to teach now? His voice dripped with contempt. You think reading your Bible between shifts makes you qualified to coach my fighters? David kept his eyes down, but Derek stepped closer, invading his space. I asked you a question. Did you just try to correct my instruction? The student circled closer, eager for blood. Ryan looked conflicted. Laura Chen reached for her phone, sensing what was coming. Answer me, Derek snapped. David lifted his gaze, calm and steady, cross glinting under the lights. You're teaching him wrong, he said quietly. That defense will get him hurt. The room erupted in murmurs. Derek's face flushed, rage boiling at being challenged. Publicly, by a Christian janitor. Wrong. Derek laughed, but the sound was brittle. 20 years of prayer doesn't make you a fighter, and tonight I'll prove it. I know that keeping your chin up in a choke is suicide, David Miller said quietly. Derek Stone froze, his humiliation complete. His students were looking at him differently now, questions forming in their eyes. He needed to crush this challenge immediately, permanently. Fine. Show us your expert technique. Derek pointed toward the heavy bag. Demonstrate proper form for the class. David shook his head. I just cleaned here. I'm ordering you to demonstrate. Unless you're admitting you don't know what you're talking about. The trap was perfect. Refuse, and he'd look like a fraud. Comply, and he'd reveal himself. David glanced around at Ryan Carter's confused face, at Laura Chen's worried expression, at the students clutching their phones. He walked slowly to the heavy bag and set his mop aside. What happened next would change everything. David's first combination flowed like water. A flawless jab cross-hook sequence snapped the 100-pound bag back nearly 3 feet. The chain groaned in protest. His footwork was textbook, his rhythm effortless. The second combination nearly ripped the bag from its mount. Dead silence filled the gym. Derek's mouth hung open. Ryan's eyes widened in recognition. This was how real fighters moved. David stepped back quickly, regret flickering across his face. He'd revealed too much. Derek's skin went from red to purple, his humiliation complete and public. Don't ever disrespect me in my own gym again, he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. Or you'll be looking for a new job tomorrow. But they both knew the damage was already done. The students had seen something that would gnaw at Derek's authority. Undeniable proof that the Christian janitor knew more about fighting than their celebrated instructor. That night, Derek Stone scoured every database he could access. By dawn, he'd unearthed fragments of a story that made his blood run cold. Amateur boxing records, military service documentation, yellowed newspaper clippings featuring a young Golden Gloves champion who looked exactly like his janitor. But instead of backing down, Derek's fragile ego doubled down on destruction. Week 1 began with systematic humiliation. Derek scheduled emergency cleaning during peak training hours, forcing David to mop around live sparring sessions. Sweat and blood-stained floors he had just polished, and Derek stood nearby, arms folded, ensuring maximum degradation. Careful around the equipment, preacher, Derek would announce loudly. We can't afford to have someone break something expensive. The word preacher became Derek's favorite weapon, spat with just enough venom to sting, but not quite enough to trigger formal complaints. He made jokes about David probably blessing the mop water or praying the mirrors clean. Nervous laughter followed, but unease lingered in the room. Laura Chen kept notes at the front desk, evidence she prayed she'd never need. David endured it with the patience of a man who had survived far worse. Hannah needed her school supplies. Rent was due in 10 days. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford, but Derek wasn't satisfied with quiet suffering. He wanted total dominance. Every morning, Derek arrived early to inspect David's overnight cleaning, finding fault with spotless surfaces. "This mirror has streaks," he'd announce, pointing to a reflection with no flaw. "Do it again." David would re-clean the same glass 3 times while Derek watched smugly. The degradation became ritual. Derek timed bathroom breaks to coincide with David's presence, firing off barbs about knowing your station and leaving the preaching for Sundays. Other trainers began avoiding the scenes, unwilling to witness the slow dismantling of a man's dignity. Week 2 brought psychological warfare. Derek circulated those old clippings among his inner circle, spinning a narrative of a washed-up has-been who hid behind faith because he couldn't cut it in the ring. "Did you know our janitor used to think he was a fighter?" Derek announced loudly during a group session. "Golden gloves, apparently. Guess prayer didn't carry him to the big leagues." Ryan Carter shifted uncomfortably. He had been watching David's movements since the heavy bag incident, recognizing something Derek didn't. The way David instinctively shifted his weight when studying technique. The way his hands naturally rose into guard while wiping down machines. Derek's social media posts grew increasingly pointed. Pictures of Summit Forge's state-of-the-art training always seemed to feature David in the background, bent over cleaning with captions like, "Know your place." Not everyone's called to fight. His followers lapped it up, sharing memes about praying janitors and faith versus reality. From Derek's perspective, this wasn't cruelty. It was dominance. His entire image depended on being the alpha of Summit Forge Academy, and a Christian janitor who could throw sharper combinations than him was an existential threat. The harassment escalated daily. Derek would kick equipment into David's path, forcing him to clean around it. He'd schedule his loudest, flashiest demonstrations exactly when David worked nearby, ensuring maximum disruption. He encouraged students to joke about holy water buckets while David scrubbed in silence, their awkward chuckles cutting like blades. By week 3, Derek was ready for the breaking point he'd been building toward. "David, hold pads for demonstration," Derek barked one crowded evening. David looked up from arranging gloves. "I'm not trained for that, sir." "You seemed confident about technique last week." "Hold the pads." 20 students formed a circle as David reluctantly picked up the focus mitts. Derek began with light combinations, showing off for the crowd, but his strikes grew heavier, each one snapping harder against David's hands. "See how I target specific angles?" Derek explained to his students while pounding away. A real fighter adapts his power. But everyone could see, this wasn't instruction. This was punishment. David absorbed each impact without complaint. Years of military training kept his face neutral, even as his hands began to ache. But Derek wasn't finished. He started throwing combinations that deliberately missed the pads, glancing off David's forearms and shoulders. "Oops," Derek said with fake concern. "Better reflexes next time, preacher." The accidental shot to David's injured left shoulder, an old military injury Derek had somehow learned about, sent lightning bolts of pain down his arm. David dropped the pads and nearly retaliated, his right fist curling tight before he forced it open again. "That's right," Derek jeered. "Walk away like you always do. At least you know your place." But Derek's masterstroke came that weekend. Gym security footage showing David's heavy bag demonstration suddenly appeared on Derek's Instagram account with the caption, "When the janitor thinks prayer makes him a fighter, know your place. Stay humble, Summit Forge." The video exploded across social media. Within hours, it had thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most of them ugly, mocking, and exactly what Derek had hoped for. "Stick to church pews," one user sneered. "Christian Rocky thinks he can fight," another laughed. Sunday night, David found his daughter Hannah crying in her room. her phone trembling in her hands as she scrolled through the cruel comments. "Dad, why don't you fight back?" she whispered. David had no answer that wouldn't break her heart further. On Monday night, Coach Ramirez found David sitting in the supply closet among buckets and cleaning chemicals, his head buried in his hands. "I saw the video," Ramirez said quietly. David didn't look up. "I need this job. That man's going to destroy me if I fight back." "I heard him talking to Laura," Ramirez cut in firmly. "He's already looking for a replacement. He's planning to fire you anyway." David finally raised his eyes. For the first time, Ramirez saw something other than resignation there. Something dangerous, something long buried, stirring awake. The gym clock read 2:17 a.m. when David finally stopped pretending. The last staff had gone home hours earlier, leaving him alone with his ghosts and the security cameras that had been silent witnesses to Derek's campaign of humiliation. He walked over to the same heavy bag that had betrayed his secret 3 weeks earlier. His cleaning cart sat abandoned by the wall as he carefully unwrapped the hand wraps he had hidden inside a roll of paper towels. Old leather strips, worn smooth by decades of sweat and grit. The last remnants of a life he had never fully let go of. The first combination flowed like scripture recited from memory. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Each strike snapping with surgical precision and sledgehammer power. The bag shuddered, chains groaning against the ceiling beams, but David wasn't shadow boxing for therapy anymore. He was remembering. Unbeknownst to him, Ramirez had returned to the gym for forgotten car keys. Through the glass doors, the 60-year-old trainer stopped dead. What he saw wasn't just a janitor blowing off steam. It was a fighter unveiling 2 decades of mastery. Perfect footwork, flawless combinations, defense sharp as steel. Ramirez entered quietly, the keys forgotten in his palm, as David transitioned into grappling movements against an invisible opponent. His body flowed with the intelligence of someone who had fought battles that could never be replicated in a classroom. "Holy Christ," Ramirez muttered under his breath. David spun around, caught mid-motion. For a long moment, they just stared across the fluorescent silence. "How long?" Ramirez asked simply. "Golden Gloves Regional Champion 2003 to 2007, David said at last, pulling the cracked wraps from his hands. "Military combatives instructor for 8 years after that. Mixed martial arts training for 15 years total." Ramirez shook his head in amazement. "And you've been watching Derek teach garbage to paying students for how long?" "Every night," David replied, his voice taut with suppressed frustration. "His defenses are reckless. His combinations leave holes that would get these kids hurt, or worse, in a real fight. But I can't afford to say anything. I need this job." "Not anymore," Ramirez said sharply. His expression hardened. "You're gone whether you fight back or not. Derek told Laura he's interviewing replacements next week." The words hit David like a body blow. 3 years of swallowed pride, endured humiliation, and silent suffering, all unraveling, wasted. "There's more," Ramirez continued. "The gym owner has started looking into Derek. Too many complaints. Too many staff walking away. Laura's been documenting everything, building a case." David slumped against the heavy bag. "Hannah's college applications are due in 6 months. I can't afford unemployment." "Listen carefully." Ramirez leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Derek's planning something bigger than just firing you. I heard him talking on the phone. He wants to bury you. He wants to ruin your name so you'll never work again." The older trainer paused, eyes narrowing. "But what if we turned it around? What if instead of being his victim, you became the man who exposed what kind of fraud he really is?" David's head lifted slowly. For the first time, he saw respect in Ramirez's eyes. Not pity, not sympathy, respect. "What are you suggesting?" "A formal challenge," Ramirez said. "Fighter to fighter. You call him out. Demand he face you in the ring. No more hiding behind insults. No more power games. Just you and him." David shook his head. "He'll never agree." "He will if you do it right," Ramirez pressed. "Derek's entire image depends on being the toughest guy in the room. If you challenge him publicly, in front of his students and his followers, his ego won't let him back down." Ramirez pulled out his phone, showing David Derek's latest Instagram post. Another mocking video, this time a clip of David cleaning, captioned, "Some people don't know their calling." Stick to scrubbing floors. Walks limitations, Bashner. Faith doesn't fight. You answer this, Ramirez said, tapping the screen. Make it about dignity, respect, faith. You force him to either accept or look like a coward to everyone who keeps his empire alive. David stared at the phone screen, scrolling through dozens of anti-Christian comments beneath Derek's post. His daughter Hannah's tear-streaked face when she'd first seen the original video burned in his memory. And if I lose? David muttered. You won't, Coach Ramirez replied firmly. I've been training fighters for 30 years. Derek Stone is a regional amateur with good marketing skills. You're a trained warrior who's been holding back because you're a decent man. David rewrapped his hands slowly, the ritual calming him, muscle memory guiding each loop and pull. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like himself again. At 3:47 a.m., a simple, direct comment appeared beneath Derek's Instagram post. You want to settle this like men? I challenge you to face me in the ring. Winner takes all. Loser leaves Summit Forge permanently, unless you're afraid to fight someone who might actually fight back. David Miller. By morning, the comment had hundreds of likes and replies. Derek's followers were tagging him relentlessly, demanding a response. His carefully cultivated image as the gym's alpha male was crumbling under silence. To ignore it would brand him a coward. By Tuesday afternoon, Summit Forge Academy buzzed with anticipation. MMA forums were alive with debate. Amateur fighters across Redwood City whispered about the Janitor's challenge. Even local betting sites were offering odds. You're really going to fight the Christian Janitor? Ryan Carter asked, no longer mocking, just curious. Derek's ego made the decision for him. Backing down would destroy him. Winning would cement his dominance forever. That Friday, after regular hours, Derek stood before a packed gym. Since David wants to embarrass himself publicly, I'll give him that chance. Word spread like wildfire. By Wednesday, over 200 requests for ringside viewing had forced Laura Chen to implement a reservation system. Local sports bloggers and fight enthusiasts flooded in. Derek spent the week training harder than he had in years, flooding Instagram with videos captioned "Reality Check Incoming" and "Faith Won't Save You in the Cage." David trained in secret. Ramirez unlocked the gym early each morning, quietly working with him. The older coach was stunned by what he saw. Surgical combinations, flawless defensive flow, conditioning that suggested David had never truly stopped. Friday night, Summit Forge transformed into a coliseum. Phones lit every corner, live streams broadcasting to thousands. Betting pools swelled. Derek shadow-boxed for the cameras, jaw tight. Trash talk rolling out for his audience. David entered through the back door. No fanfare. No entourage, just a man in plain black shorts, his cross necklace tucked under his shirt, ready to face what had to be faced. The ring was nothing more than taped lines on the training floor, but the atmosphere was electric. Ramirez served as David's corner. Derek pulled Ryan to his. 3 rounds, 3 minutes, or until someone can't continue, Laura announced reluctantly, standing as referee. Touch gloves and keep it clean. Derek bounced on his toes, nervous energy spilling out in a stream of words. Hope you're ready for this, preacher. Time to learn your place. David stood still. Calm. Breathing slow. Focused. When Derek thrust his gloves forward for the ritual touch, David met them quietly, respectfully. Fight, Laura said. Derek exploded forward. Throwing haymakers meant for a viral knockout. He wanted brutality, spectacle. But David wasn't there. Slip right, duck left, step inside the arc. Every wild punch cut air. The crowd's cheers turned confused. Why wasn't the Janitor fighting back? David spent round 1 dismantling Derek's ego without throwing more than 3 light jabs, each snapping Derek's head just enough to prove he was being toyed with. By the bell, Derek stumbled back to his corner, chest heaving. Why won't he fight? Derek gasped. Maybe because he doesn't need to, Ryan muttered quietly, finally recognizing what Derek refused to see. Round 2 was no mercy. David began throwing combinations. Not brutal, but perfect. A crisp jab cross landed flush. A body hook doubled Derek over. An uppercut ripped his mouthguard free. Phones captured every second as the so-called alpha was broken down by the Christian janitor he mocked. "This isn't a fight," Ramirez whispered in awe between rounds. "This is a clinic. Round 3 never truly began." Derek came out desperate, technique shattered, cardio gone. He hurled a telegraphed right cross with all his weight. David stepped inside, delivering a left hook so precise it echoed like a gunshot. Derek collapsed instantly, body limp before he hit the mat. The room fell silent but for the hum of recording phones. David knelt beside him, checking pulse and breathing, professionalism overriding triumph. When Derek's eyes fluttered open, David helped him sit. "You all right?" he asked softly. Derek nodded weakly, his pride crushed more than his jaw. The gym erupted in cheers. Justice for David trended within the hour as clips rocketed across platforms. Professional fighters reposted the knockout with captions like, "That's how it's done." Derek Stone's reputation wasn't dented, it was annihilated. But even in victory, David extended the grace Derek had never shown. He helped his former tormentor to his feet, dignity intact, faith unshaken. Yet the real fight was only beginning. Saturday morning, Derek woke to find his empire crumbling. The knockout video had gone viral worldwide, over 2 million views in 12 hours. His first call was to Richard Kellerman. "An expensive attorney. I want to file assault charges," Derek said, jaw throbbing. By Monday, the narrative had flipped. Derek appeared on local morning shows with gauze wrapped dramatically around his jaw. He spoke softly about being ambushed by a dangerous, unstable janitor. "My client feared for his safety," Kellerman told reporters. "Mr. Miller used professional-level violence against an amateur instructor who was simply trying to guide him through anger issues. This was clearly a premeditated assault disguised as a sparring match." At 6 a.m. Tuesday, police arrived at David's apartment. Hannah stood frozen at the kitchen window, tears streaming down her face as officers led her father away in handcuffs. Neighbors peeked from their doors, whispering as the Christian man who had humbled Derek Stone was taken into custody. Derek's media blitz was flawless. Talk shows painted him as the victim. News outlets replayed his trembling interviews. But beneath the surface, something else was spreading faster. The truth. "I gave David Miller a job when no one else would," Derek told Channel 12's sympathetic anchor. "I tried to mentor him to give him structure and purpose. And this is how he repaid me, with violence that could have killed me. The selective editing was masterful. Security footage showed David's knockout punch but carefully omitted Derek's weeks of harassment, public humiliation, and staged provocations. Social media algorithms pushed Derek's version to audiences already inclined to distrust someone like David, a devout Christian, a man wearing a cross in a world ready to label faith as fanaticism. Public opinion began to shift. Local Facebook groups filled with comments about religious extremists and dangerous zealots who didn't belong in civilized society. The original hashtag, #Justice for David, was drowned out by #Justice for Derek. With calls for David's imprisonment, David's court-appointed attorney, Jennifer Walsh, was an exhausted public defender juggling nearly 50 cases. Their consultation lasted 15 minutes. "Mr. Miller, they're seeking felony assault with enhanced penalties for workplace violence," Walsh explained, flipping through Derek's glossy medical records. "He's claiming concussion symptoms, lost income, emotional distress, medical bills, over $200,000. In the courthouse hallway, Hannah watched Derek perform for the cameras outside. His jaw, still wrapped in gauze, didn't stop him from giving interview after interview about his long road to recovery and his fear of retaliation from a dangerous Christian janitor. The legal machinery turned quickly. Kellerman filed motions to suppress the viral fight video, claiming it was recorded without consent and would prejudice jurors. He demanded character witnesses for Derek while painting David as a violent zealot with concealed combat training. Laura Chen faced an impossible choice. She had crucial evidence: Derek's harassment logs, security footage of weeks of abuse, even audio of him mocking David's faith and vowing to break him until he quits. But Summit Forge's primary investor, James Morrison warned her bluntly, "If you testify against Derek, you're terminated immediately. We cannot have employees undermining our trainers. Personal feelings don't matter." Meanwhile, Derek's victim narrative swelled his social media empire. Thousands of new followers praised him as a hard-working man threatened by a dangerous religious radical. His GoFundMe campaign raised $50,000 in just 4 days. The turning point came from Hannah. Heartbroken by her father's daily vilification, she launched a TikTok account. "My dad is the most gentle man I know," she said in a tearful video that eventually reached 3 million viewers. "He worked nights cleaning that gym to pay for my school clothes and my mom's hospital bills before she died." Derek Stone tormented him for 3 years because of his faith, and nobody helped him. Her videos show David's Golden Gloves trophies, his military service medals, and photos of him volunteering at youth boxing programs. They humanized him in ways his lawyer could not. But the prosecution pressed on. "Mr. Miller is not the victim here," argued prosecutor Amanda Carter during pretrial hearings. "He is a highly trained man who chose to unleash professional-level violence against an amateur trainer. His background in combat sports and military training made him responsible for exercising restraint, regardless of provocation." The preliminary hearing overflowed with supporters from both camps. Derek's followers wore "Justice for Derek" shirts, chanting about workplace safety. David's supporters, galvanized by Hannah's viral campaign and the revived Soccer Justice for David movement, filled the other half with signs about dignity and faith. Coach Ramirez sat quietly in the back, phone heavy in his pocket. He carried the recordings, 17 minutes of Derek mocking David's Christianity, threatening to fire him, and bragging about forcing him into a breakdown. Releasing them would mean retaliation from the gym and likely losing his job. But as he watched David face the possibility of 5 years in prison, Ramirez knew job security was meaningless compared to justice. That night, Ramirez uploaded the recordings to a private YouTube channel and sent the link to Hannah with a short message. "Your father is a good man. He deserves better." Hannah's hands trembled as she pressed play. Derek's voice filled her headphones, mocking prayers, sneering about Christians being weak, openly plotting to push David until he snapped. By dawn, the recordings were everywhere. Justice for David surged back with devastating force. Public opinion flipped overnight. Derek's abuse was undeniable. But Derek Stone wasn't finished. Backed into a corner, his reputation ruined and his legal case unraveling, he prepared his final and most dangerous play. On the morning of David Miller's trial, the Maricopa County Courthouse buzzed with tension. Media vans clogged the streets. Protesters lined the sidewalks, some chanting Bible verses, others shouting for prison time. Police monitored the swelling crowds. Derek Stone sat at the prosecutor's table. No longer the strutting alpha of Summit Forge, but a cornered man, jaw clenched, eyes cold, determined to drag David down with him. The confident gym owner who had mocked and humiliated David Miller for 3 years was gone, replaced by a man whose reputation lay in ruins. His social media following collapsed from 200,000 to barely 30,000 overnight. Sponsors fled. Membership at Summit Forge Academy evaporated. But Derek's lawyer, Richard Kellerman, was still confident. Despite the damning audio evidence, he had one weapon left: the law itself. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Kellerman began in his opening statement, "this case is not about workplace arguments or hurt feelings. This case is about a trained fighter who used potentially lethal force against an amateur instructor who posed no real threat. He painted Derek as the victim, a man whose career had been destroyed by one violent punch. He emphasized David's Golden Gloves history, his military combatives training, his deliberate concealment of his abilities. Mr. Miller is not some helpless janitor," Kellerman said gravely. "He is a decorated fighter who knew exactly how dangerous his actions were. And the law is clear. Superior training creates superior responsibility." David's attorney, Jennifer Walsh, was no longer alone. The case's viral reach had brought pro bono help from high-profile civil liberties lawyers, but she still faced Arizona's strict assault statutes. Derek's testimony was theater, With a neck brace for effect, he spoke softly about his trauma. "I thought I was going to die," Derek said, his voice breaking. "One moment it was friendly training, the next I was unconscious. I still have nightmares." He claimed the fight was David's idea, insisting it was an unprovoked attack during what I thought was a light exercise. But Walsh was ready. "Mr. Stone," she began, pacing slowly, "in your own words, recorded on March 15th, you told Coach Ramirez, and I quote, 'I'm going to break that preacher down until he quits or does something stupid.' Do you remember saying that?" Derek's jaw tightened. "I don't recall. You mocked his faith almost daily, didn't you? Calling him preacher, sneering at his prayers?" "I may have used casual terms," Derek said weakly. "Casual?" Walsh's voice sharpened. "We have 17 separate recordings of you mocking Mr. Miller's Christianity. Are you telling this jury that was casual?" The jury leaned forward. Derek flushed crimson. "You kicked over his cleaning bucket deliberately, didn't you?" "That was an accident. You scheduled cleaning during sparring hours to humiliate him. I needed the facility maintained. You posted a video of him on social media with mocking captions," Derek snapped. "I was just showing some people don't know their calling." The courtroom fell silent. In one slip, Derek revealed his contempt. Laura Chen's testimony followed, devastating and detailed. She described filing 7 formal complaints against Derek, each ignored by management. "He explicitly told me he would force David to quit or break him," she said firmly. Then came Coach Ramirez. His credibility as a veteran trainer was unassailable. His secret recordings were irrefutable. "Derek Stone systematically harassed David Miller for 3 years, Ramirez testified. "He mocked his faith, used physical intimidation, and staged a campaign of humiliation designed to provoke exactly what happened. This wasn't a workplace accident. It was targeted abuse." Finally, David took the stand. He spoke quietly, but each word cut deeper than any punch. "I endured it for 3 years, he said, glancing toward Hannah in the gallery, "because my daughter needed me to have that job. I let him mock my faith because she needed school clothes. I cleaned up his messes because she needed food on the table. I took his abuse because she needed a father who kept showing up," Derek snapped. "That's a lie," he roared, leaping to his feet. "You wanted to fight me. You loved showing off your training. You wanted to humiliate me." Judge Patricia Hawkins pounded her gavel for order, but Derek was beyond restraint. "Years of bitterness exploded. I gave you a job. I tried to help you, preacher, and you repaid me by trying to kill me. You people always think you deserve more than you earn. You hide behind your religion, behind your Bible, demanding respect you never worked for. Well, look where it got you. Facing prison." The damage was fatal to his case. Derek had revealed his true self, vindictive, hateful, bigoted, in front of the jury. The jury deliberated for only 47 minutes. "On the charge of felony assault," the foreman said, "we find the defendant, David Miller, not guilty." The courtroom erupted. Hannah burst into tears. Supporters cheered. Derek slumped forward, pale, broken. Judge Hawkins delivered the final blow. "Mr. Stone is ordered to pay $75,000 in compensatory damages for legal fees, lost wages, and emotional distress." The verdict triggered a cascade. The Arizona Athletic Commission revoked Derek's license to operate a training facility. Summit Forge cut ties immediately. His sponsorships vanished. His reputation was radioactive. David, meanwhile, received offers from elite gyms, lucrative, prestigious roles. He turned them all down. Instead, he used his settlement and crowd-funded donations to open Second Chance Defense Academy, a faith-informed, community-focused martial arts school on a sliding scale. "Everyone deserves dignity," David told local reporters. "Real strength doesn't come from domination. It comes from protecting others." The academy combined self-defense with de-escalation training, what David called warrior ethics. Hannah managed its growing online presence. Ramirez became his partner. Even Ryan Carter, Derek's former star student, joined as one of the first pupils, finally learning real technique. Derek's downfall accelerated. Reduced to working at a Nevada strip mall gym for minimum wage, he faced multiple lawsuits from former staff citing religious discrimination, backed by Ramirez's recordings. Meanwhile, Justice for David evolved into second chance defense, a cultural shift in martial arts, elevating respect and humility over toxic machismo. Fighters across the country cited David's knockout and his dignity as inspiration. 6 months later, Second Chance Defense Academy buzzed with life. Kids learned anti-bullying tactics. Seniors practiced balance and defense. Former gang members trained alongside suburban parents, all united by a philosophy that true strength was moral as well as physical. The movement spread beyond Redwood City. Professional fighters visited. Media outlets covered its success, and 1 year later, David stood in the middle of his own academy, watching a 12-year-old girl named Sophia Chen practicing defense drills with focus and joy. Second Chance Defense Academy had become more than a gym. It was a movement, proof that dignity could outlast humiliation, that faith could survive fire, and that real warriors lift others up instead of tearing them down. Derek Stone's greatest punishment wasn't financial ruin. It was living long enough to watch David Miller become everything Derek had pretended to be: respected, admired, and free. Over 300 gyms across North America adopted the David Miller standards, mandatory anti-harassment policies, faith respect clauses, and zero tolerance for discrimination based on religion or belief. The International Mixed Martial Arts Federation created an annual award in David's name, honoring instructors who embodied warrior ethics and community values. Hannah Miller graduated Arizona State with honors. Her sociology thesis, From Janitor to Warrior, How Social Media Amplifies Justice Movements, became required reading at several universities. Accepted to Harvard Law School, she planned to specialize in workplace discrimination and religious freedom law. "My father taught me that real strength isn't about winning fights," Hannah said during her TEDx talk, which reached 2 million viewers. "It's about standing firm in your beliefs, even when standing up costs you everything." Derek Stone's story became a cautionary tale in business ethics courses. At 37, reduced to working at a strip mall gym in rural Montana, he had lost his house, his social media following, and, most importantly, his identity. Every attempt to rebuild his reputation was met with reminders of his documented abuse. But Derek's downfall served a larger purpose. It proved that bullies could face real consequences when victims found courage and communities chose justice over comfort. The documentary Second Chance, the David Miller story, premiered at Sundance, earning critical acclaim for its raw look at workplace harassment and anti-Christian discrimination. Netflix acquired worldwide rights, reaching 40 million viewers. Professional MMA fighters regularly visited Second Chance Defense Academy to train under David, drawn by his unmatched technique and his philosophy of faith-driven strength. Former UFC champion Daniel Cormier called him the most important martial arts instructor in America today. The Academy's scholarship program, funded entirely by donations from DASH's Second Chance Defense supporters, provided free training for over 400 low-income students annually. David's philosophy was simple. Everyone deserves the tools to protect themselves and the wisdom to use those tools responsibly. Coach Ramirez, now in his 60s, served as head instructor, while David expanded their faith-informed anti-bullying curriculum into public schools. 17 school districts adopted the program, reporting bullying incidents reduced by 60%. Ryan Carter, Derek's former star pupil, became a professional fighter. His undefeated amateur record and promising debut were credited publicly to the lessons he learned under David's patient instruction. His posts often read, "Faith, respect, and discipline, taught to me at Second Chance Defense." The Academy's walls filled with thank you letters. Formerly bullied kids shared stories of courage. Parents wrote about children learning to defend classmates instead of standing by. Laura Chen, who risked her career by testifying against Derek, became the Academy's business manager. She lost her corporate job, but gained something greater, the knowledge she had helped save an innocent man's life. David's daily routine remained humble. He still arrived early. He still cleaned his own gym floors, but now they were his. The heavy bag that had exposed his secret hung in the Academy's main hall, beside a plaque reading, "Sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one mocked for his faith." Above the mats, written in David's own hand, the Academy's mission statement read, "We teach people to fight so they'll never have to fight. We build strength so our students can protect the weak. We demand respect by showing respect. This is the warrior way." As the afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting shadows on mats where children, veterans, and parents trained side by side, David Miller smiled. He had once been mocked as just a Christian janitor. Now he was something greater, a teacher, a leader, a man whose faith had endured humiliation and emerged unbroken. Some victories, he realized, are worth waiting 20 years to achieve.